At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farm. Not only that, but many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. This is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
Some researchers have estimated that the value of the labor extracted from enslaved Africans was up to $24 trillion, and others up to $97 trillion. Taking an average of these estimates yields a conservative valuation of up to $50 trillion, which is the effective size of tax imposed on Black people between 1619 and 1860. These estimates do not include any costs associated with the unimaginable pain and suffering, such as murder, rape, torture, separation of families, denied entrepreneurial enterprise, denial of education, theft of inventions and intellectual property, denial of freedom and the right to pursue happiness that accompanied the daily life of a slave over the course of 17 generations. So we are talking about a considerable, almost incalculable sum of money extracted from enslaved Africans that created extraordinary wealth for this country and for white America that was never recouped by American descendants of chattel slavery.
What is up, ADOS and our allies? Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the Central. Good evening on the East Coast. You know who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the Friends of ADOS TV, bringing you those ADOS hot topics and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote and socializing our suffering family. And today, we're going to talk about it. Oh, yes, y'all been coming for my throat. For my head, I have just become a human punching bag for some of you. Not the ones that show me love, of course, like Robin the Girl Wonder, like Mike Michelson, like Shannon McFall, like Ali, Kiki, and Bari. Okay, welcome to Live, my love. We're going to see if you a friend or a foe of Angela Nirvana. Because you guys know I keep it 100 over here. I'm here to serve up that T.R. Ruth family. And we're going to get into it today because many people believe that the Black descendants of Seminole and Cherokee slaves in this country is not our monkey and not our circus. We're going to talk about it, family, because I need to share with you the way I see it like I always do. What's up, Al Body Winbush? Thank you for joining the live, my love. Yes, we're going to talk about Trump and how the Congress override his veto dealing with the military defense. Oh, yes. And we're going to talk about the beautiful sister, may she rest in power, the doctor who this country allowed to die in the hospital. We're going to hear from her 2 weeks, okay, prior to her demise from the COVID because of her mistreatment for being ADOS in that hospital. An ADOS doctor in the hospital getting mistreated by this country with 3 Ks. We're going to get into it, family. I'm going to start. Oh, my God, where do I start? I think I'm going to start with Trump and get him out the way because, you know, it is what it is with that family. I thought, you know, he was opposing like more military defense budgets and carrying on because we understand, we overstand how that's in the trillions of dollars, along with this stimulus package, as they tell American descendants of chattel slavery, that they can do nothing about the trillions we are owed. Speaking of which, yes, family, my number that I'm working with within the Friends of American Descendants of Chattel Slavery community, which I started a page today. It's not finished getting fleshed out, but 17 trillion is way too low, given with Sean D. Rochester from the Black Tax, the Cost of Being Black in America. We've been reading this, family. We're on part 3. So my new number, drum roll, please, is a modest conservative $104 trillion. Yes, I didn't stutter. $104 trillion on the low end with a T, and about 735 billion reoccurring expenses annually. And I just want to share with you quickly before I get into Trump being overrode, his veto being overridden by the Congress, I want to just share with you where that number is derived. So we've been going over this book. We're now in section 3. I've been reading to you daily, well, not daily, twice a week when I come online. We dig into different facets of this book. I decided to read it to you because, number one, I love, love, love to read. Number two, many of our people are auditory. Some by nature of the fact that they are working 50,000 gig jobs just to pay the mortgage or the rents, more than likely, because we're a wealthless group. Many of us don't even have a mortgage. I don't understand how any of this works for anyone, that the people whose ancestors built this country with their lives, their blood and bones, should be the anchor of the country. I don't know how this works, but what I do know is that capitalism requires a bottom caste, and they've decided we were it since well before they brought us over here in chains. And when they stopped calling us nigger, because they like their racism to be very covert, you see. This is what they like in Biden-Harris. They thought, our electorate thought, 85% of us thought it was better to replace a racist in office for 4 years with a combined racist in office for a combined 65 years. So that showed me how much work I've got to do, we've got to do with our own people, so that they can have a resolve within themselves that they are owed reparations in the trillions over multi-generations. And without it, our people will perish like those I'm going to read to you about. Wait for that. Anywho, meaning the Cherokee and Seminole Indians, the Black Cherokee and Seminole descendant of slave labor. Are they not, in fact, American descendants of slavery? Okay, just ponder that as I get into this. Okay, so this is Sean D. Rochester's number that I'm working with. I know that the movement is working with 17 trillion with Dr. William Sandy Darity. I have yet to hear his book. I have yet to hear him make that case, but I'm telling you what I'm on. And that's what I need, comrades. I need grassroots and allies who want to work with me and what I'm trying to do over at the Friends of American Descendant of Chattel Slavery community. And I'm getting everything in position for us to find one another. If I can do it for the ADOS movement at large, I was a co-founder of ADOS SoCal back in shortly after Juneteenth, 2019. I could just reinvent the wheel and do my thing in peace. That is my plan. So let me tell you how the number was derived, and then we'll get into the rest of the segment of the show. So Sean talked about, and I've read it, look at the archives, that slavery from 1619 to 1865, some people say it's valued at around between 24 trillion and 93 trillion dollars. That's the value of our enslavement from 1619. We're not talking about the slavery that preceded that, because the Spaniards owned us too. That'll be a whole nother segment, a whole nother show. I'll touch on it a little bit in what I have to share with you tonight about the Cherokee and Seminole Indians, but I digress. So slavery, he just went down the middle and said, okay, the black tax for slavery from 1619 to 1865 is $50 trillion. That's a long cry from the 17 trillion that Darity is demanding. That's okay. We can do our own thing. Present value of black labor in 1860 is valued. Now, this is 2017 when this was published. So understand what I'm telling you. The longer they wait to repair us, the more these values go up for me and the people who are going to fight with me for the proper value of what we're truly owed. I am a negotiator by trade. I don't believe in starting where you want to end up. That's not how negotiations work. You usually got to go where you need to be or higher than that, and somewhere you meet in the middle. So ain't no need in playing with this. If I'm going to spend my time, my energy, and my resources fighting, I need to be fighting for the right number. 17 trillion has never settled with me. And I get that Darity has done the work. Kudos to him. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. But I like these numbers, and this is what I'm going to be presenting to Congress in terms of making us whole. So 50 trillion for slavery from 1619 to 1865. The present value of black labor in 1860 is valued at 22 trillion, published in 2017. The clock just keeps ticking on these numbers. Just know that and believe that that's going to be changing. The longer they wait, this number grows. And it's not our fault. It's not our fault that they refuse to repair us and that they took away the 40 acres and a mule. That's their monkey in their circus. I'm not saying they have to cut a $104 trillion check. They can do it over multi-generations. Monthly payments, they can figure it out. If they can figure out the trillions they spent on the military defense budget, and they can figure out how to just come up with $10 trillion to fix this economy in a pandemic, then they can come up with this. I'm not worried about that aspect of it. They'll have to get with the program. Homestead Act, okay, 1862 to 1935. This is when they gave our 40 acres and a mule to white folks, white immigrants and white peasants and white folks that were owning us and the whole 9 yards. Everything we should have received, they gave it all away to the white folks, okay? Whether they gave it, whether they were coming here for the first time into this country, they migrated over here, or whether they were here. 93 years of remedies and solutions that should have been the American descendant of chattel slavery, akin to affirmative action, how that now benefits white women, immigrants, and then LGBTQIA. The Homestead Act was all white. Very little exceptions with us as American descendants of chattel slavery, who built all the wealth all of these groups eat from. I'm unapologetic. He's saying 1.6 trillion. Sharecropping. Okay, because see, slavery never ended for us. Understand this, family. Slavery still goes on to this day for American descendants of chattel slavery, because we were erased from the very affirmative action that was intended to make us whole post-slavery. They gave it to white women, they gave it to immigrants, they gave it to LGBTQIA. If we're lucky, a few of us, receive a few crumbs, and we've been able to kind of claw our way out of it, but we still are a wealthless group, despite the fact that we have income, okay? So they're saying here, the sharecropping Jim Crow society from 1870 to 1935 is worth 15 trillion. Now, the great economic expansion from 1935 to 1965, our labor was valued at 4.4 trillion. Education, these are the costs, 2 trillion. Housing, 1.75 trillion. Post-civil rights era, 1960 to the present, decades of a persistent black-white employment gap valued at $3.3 trillion, and missing intergenerational inheritance is around $4.2 trillion. Now, when I total all of that, it's around $104 trillion, $104.25 trillion. I just round down to $104 trillion for my number of what I will be demanding of the government. Okay, for our reparations for those things. And this is, like I said, through 2017, because my reparations number is not just for slavery. It's for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. Now, moving on, because we've got some continuing cost that I'm also demanding. $317 billion per year, current cost of lost equity value, $20 billion per year, current cost of 350,000 missing Black teachers. I'm demanding $30 billion per year, which is the current lost income from Black prison population. I'm demanding $80 billion per year, persistent 6-decade Black and white employment gap. I'm demanding $72 billion to $93 billion lost, and I'm demanding $93 billion, not the low end. And lost in 2005 to foreclosures from discriminatory subprime lending, and I'm demanding $94 billion. Well, I'm actually demanding $123 billion. Cost of workplace discrimination in 1970. Once again, this is from Sean D. Rott. If you want to pick this up to understand the foundational book that I'll be using to make my demands of the government, this is it. And I'm not just going for the government. I'll be going for corporations. I'll be going for Africa, Europe, especially the Spaniards who owned us. Everybody is going to get the demands, okay? That is what I'll be doing under the Friends of American Descendant Chattel Slavery. I cannot use ADOS. Yvette is talking about making it a 501c4. Furthermore, there's so much heat around the ADOS name. It is just ridiculous. I do believe I've been shadow banned as a result, which means that my videos are not even going out to the same numbers of people it once did, because I am Friends of ADOS. So I'm demanding, absolutely, Denise Jarrett, expert stylist. Thank you for joining the live. Lafayette Ward, Justin Mathis, Joseph Thompson. I thank you guys for joining the live. Yes, I will demanding, along with other grassroots who need a place to fight and throw bricks, and allies. I am not the type to sit up here and say because you're FBA or B1 that you don't bleed ADOS. We all descend from chattel slavery, and just like there are groups within the ADOS movement who don't align with the views of Antonio and Yvette, but they're putting in the work. There are members of FBA and B1 and the like who are putting in a lot of work. Be the power, all of them. So just because you don't agree with the mudslinging of the people who founded the hashtag or founded, that's all it is. They have founded a hashtag. We have been moving. You don't need permission to move. You are free to continue to do this work. And that's why I cannot use ADOS in the community, because if I put Friends of ADOS, I'm going to be shadow banned, and I'm going to be fighting fights that I have nothing to do with. I have nothing to do with the fights of Tyreek Nasheed and Yvette Carnell. That's not my monkey, not my circus. I don't choose to get involved with the Boyce and the Jason Blacks and all this kind of nonsense, because to me, that takes up invaluable time to get this work done. And I'm about this work. I'm about liberating a people. So if that is you, either email me at friendsofadostv@gmail.com or sign up on my community page. It's not totally fleshed out yet. I'm still working on it. But hey, it's there for you to join, to let me know your interest. So when I give the signal, we can align forces to get work done locally, on the state level, and nationally. Okay? All right. So those are the numbers I'm working with. This is the text I'm working with when I form my demands. All right. So moving on. let's get into Trump. Let me share the screen. Let me share. Yes, I'm on the love train, family. Listen here. United we stand, divided we fall. And we cannot get caught up in the nonsense. We are at George Floyd 846. Let me remind you. Do we have time for these little fights and these little power struggles? I think not. I'm not participating in that. That's not mine to own. I'm on my square teaching, and this is another thing. I have been asked to, come into other spaces to fight for immigrants and poor whites. I'm okay with joining forces, but I am done. Everybody else, it's time to get off the tit. I am done spreading myself so thin, fighting the battles of all these other people for ADOS to still be tethered to the bottom. You guys love capitalism so much, then you take a turn, poor whites. Then you take a turn, immigrants. All of you are faring better than the American descendant of chattel slavery. This is my square. I know I've got work to do when 85% of our electorate chooses to go to the polls and replace a racist in office of 4 years with a racist in office for a combined 65 years. That's my work. I've got to get more American descendants of chattel slavery to understand the debt we are owed. It ain't welfare. It's not a handout. We're not victims. Well, we are victims of institutional systemic racism, but we're not demanding a handout. We're demanding the cost. The black tax, we're demanding that. We are owed this money, and until we get 85% of our electorate, to believe in that, hell, if I could just get 10%, it is a happy day, and we can do some things collectively when we move as a block to weaponize our vote and socialize our suffering. Yes, share, family, please. Thank you, our body. Craig's page, what's up? ADOS are Indians now. Well, you're gonna be the judge. You're going to be the judge. We were here before 1619, and we were enslaved, and Indians owned us. But that's going to be the latter segment. Let me dig into the top two, and then you be the judge. I've already made up my mind, and I'll share with you how I see it. And I'm hoping when I share with you, you can reach a resolve within yourself how you see it too. So let me share the screen, and then we'll get to that. Hold your horses. That's going to be the third part, okay? Let's dig into this article about Senate voting to override Trump's veto on the defense bill. Okay, so let's talk about just a little bit. I'm not going to live here because I got to move. We got a reading to do. The Senate voted on Friday. Oh, hold on one second. Let me make sure y'all can see me. We can see each other. Hold on. Okay, yes. Very good. Okay, the Senate voted on Friday to override President Donald Trump's veto of the sweeping defense bill known as the National Defense Authorization Act, delivering a bipartisan rebuke to the president in his final days in office. Trump's veto forced Republicans to decide whether to defy the president in support of legislation that sets defense policy for the country. The legislation, however, originally passed both the House and the Senate with veto-proof majorities, and the House voted on Monday to override the veto. The final vote was 81-13, far above the 2/3 majority needed. Now, Trump had threatened to veto the defense bill, which includes pay raises for America's soldiers. I'm all for that. And modernizations for equipment, because it doesn't include a repeal of Section 230, a law that shields internet companies from being liable for what is posted on their websites by them or third parties. The president responded on Twitter hours after the first veto override of his presidency, saying, "Our Republican Senate just missed the opportunity to get rid of Section 230, which gives unlimited power to big tech companies. Pathetic." The White House has not otherwise responded to CNN's request for comment on the veto override. The bill also includes provisions to limit how much money Trump can move around for his border wall and to require the military to rename bases that were named after figures from the Confederacy. Trump has said that he opposes any effort by the U.S. military to rename the nearly 12 major bases and installations that bear the names of Confederate military commanders, and he raised that issue in his veto message in addition to his complaints over Section 230. I have been clear in my opposition to politically motivated attempts like this to wash away history and dishonor the immense progress our country has fought for in realizing our founding principles. The message stated. A standoff in the Senate over the stimulus checks led to a drawn-out timeline for the final override vote after independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont indicated Monday night that he would delay a quick vote unless Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, a Kentucky Republican, brought a vote on $2,000 stimulus checks to the floor. That vote never took place, and the Senate voted Friday afternoon to end debate on the veto override. Some Democrats praised the bipartisan vote. Okay, so listen, I'm not going to read all that. This is a CNN article. You guys can look it up. What I want to say about this is who gives a damn? This is nothing here. They have spent $1 bazillion involving us in an incessant war over George Bush Jr.'s lie that there were weapons of mass destruction over in Iraq. Who gives a damn about these statutes? That's what they want us to get caught up on. And the flip to that is, if you don't have these statues around as a reminder of what they did to us, then what? Is this really what this is about? Erasing the history of what these Confederates and the Dixiecrats have done to the American descendant of chattel slavery. I don't require these type of outward type of things that folks like to get their panties in a bunch over. I don't require symbolism. I require reparations in the trillions over multi-generations. So all this kind of nonsense, I thought it was some huge military budget that he was trying to cut and to stop these incessant wars at the expense of the taxpayers while telling American descendants of chattel slavery, we don't have enough money to repair you. After not only stealing the proceeds from our ancestors' heinous chattel slave labor, but continuing it in institutional systemic racism to the point of trying to wipe us out. Okay, anywho, let's move on because I want to get to, that's my point on that. There's nothing to see here. It doesn't matter if this stays or goes. It's futile. I don't know that I want all of this stuff torn down. I think we need the constant reminder as we make demands for our reparations. That's the fight, not this silly nonsense the Congress and Trump are on. So stay focused, family. Stay on your square. So let me stop sharing that so we can move to the next story. Welcome to the live, DJ Segwan, ZZ Captron 1, Oliver Tonja, Terry Lewis. If I haven't called your name, welcome to the live, one and all. Remember to chat your comments. I'll read them before I get into the reading for the night. Okay? Now, let's move on to what happened to our fine doctor. Let me share the screen. This video went viral. Dr. Susan Moore dies of COVID after sharing about the discrimination she endured in the hospital. Let's play it.
Posted to her Facebook earlier this month, in which she describes racist treatment by medical staff at a hospital in Indianapolis who did not respond to her pleas for care despite being in intense pain and being a doctor herself. Dr. Moore says she had to beg to receive the antiviral drug remdesivir and pain medication and accuses a doctor at Indiana University Health North Hospital of ignoring her pleas because she was Black. This is Dr. Susan Moore as she summoned the energy to speak from her hospital bed days before she would die. She had an oxygen tube in her nose.
At that time, I'd only received 2 treatments of the remdesivir. He said, you don't need it. You're not even short of breath. I said, yes, I am. Then he went on to say, you don't qualify. I must have because I've gotten 2 treatments. And then he further stated.
Let me pause. It took my nephew at 30, 5 days of remdesivir to recover from the COVID, and they had only administered the good Dr. Susan Moore 2 administrations of remdesivir.
You should just go home right now. And I don't feel comfortable giving you any more narcotics. I was in so much pain from my neck. My neck hurt so bad. I was crushed. He made me feel like I was a drug addict. And he knew I was a physician. I don't take narcotics. I was hurting. So I spoke to patient advocate who left me wanting. There's not much I can do. So I started asking, send me to another hospital where they can treat me. If they're not going to treat me here properly.
This is me speaking. My sister took my nephew to the black side of town to be diagnosed with the COVID. They fought her to not give him a COVID test after he was displaying symptoms of COVID. When they gave him the test at the hospital on the black side of town, they sent him home to self-quarantine. Did you hear me? So this is what's happening to American descendants of chattel slavery. Now, my nephew had insurance, and they sent him home to where my mother lives, his sister, my niece lives, and my mom's husband. So my sister had to move him to a hotel. She had to literally sneak him into the hotel because, of course, the hotels don't want people recovering that actually have the COVID in their hotels, because why? It compromises their staff. Okay? It compromises the people that may come in and visit. It compromises the other guests that are already there and those that come behind. If you don't know that there is a person with COVID in your hotel, it could kill everybody. But she had to choose between killing her family or taking him to a hotel for him to recover. He got, and I mean, they sent him there with nothing to treat with. Okay. So he got progressively worse, even while speaking with his primary care physician, who was trying to offer up solutions over the phone and over the Zoom. He damn near died. My sister made up her mind to take him to the hospitals on the white side of town. They immediately admitted him and gave him daily doses of remdesivir, which cost $5,000 in installation. What are we dying from? COVID or medical apartheid? Moving on.
Send me to another hospital. Oh. Next thing I know, I'm getting a stat CT of my neck with and without contrast. The CT went down a little bit into my lungs, and you could see new pulmonary infiltrates, new lymphadenopathy all throughout my neck. And all of a sudden, yes, we'll treat your pain. You have to show proof that you have something wrong with you in order for you to get the medicine. I put forward and I maintain, if I was white, I wouldn't have to go through that. The other thing that white Dr. Bannock said was that if I stayed, that he would send me home Saturday at 10 p.m. in the dark. Who does that? On a weekend, who does that? This is how black people get killed. When you send them home and they don't know how to fight for themselves. I had to talk to somebody, maybe the media, somebody, to let people know how I'm being treated up in this place. And he gladly told me, I know you're a doctor. So he didn't want the black doctor to have no medicine, nothing. And then had the nerve to say it's because of him, the nurse, that I got the medicine. Really? Because of you? No. How about because I had that stat CT in my neck where it showed all of that lymphadenopathy and infiltrates? Yeah, you didn't know about that? You didn't get that in report? That's what I said. To being black up in here, this is what happens.
Dr. Susan Moore died due to complications from COVID-19 on December 20th, just over 2 weeks after she recorded this video and posted it to her Facebook page. She was 52 years old. Her 19-year-old son, Henry Muhammad, is now left to care for her parents, who are both suffering from dementia. The president and CEO of Indiana University Health issued a statement in response to her death, saying the technical aspects of the treatment she received, quote, may not have shown the level of compassion and respect we strive for in understanding what matters most to patients, unquote. Dr. Moore's chilling message has been compared to the video of George Floyd begging for his life as he was killed by Minneapolis police. When we come back, we'll speak to 2 leading Black women doctors fighting racial disparities in healthcare. They co-wrote a piece in the Washington Post titled, Say Her Name, Dr. Susan Moore.
So, what are we dying from, family? The COVID or medical apartheid? She was a doctor. Imagine what is happening, like she said, to the ADOS that cannot even fend for themselves when they go to the hospital with no advocacy and no insurance and are told to go home and self-quarantine. And it's a crapshoot. I mean, it was a real gamble for my sister to take my nephew to the hospitals on the white side of town, and they actually did something about it to help save his life. He was able to see his 31st birthday. There are far too many stories of us dying disproportionately from COVID for these kinds of reasons. Right here. Because we don't have the complexion for the protection. I want to encourage each of you to take full responsibility for your health. You must alkaline your water. I do so with limes, touch of maple syrup, some cayenne pepper, and some chia seeds. I drink a half gallon to a gallon a day of that. I've not had a cold since. Okay. You must get vitamin D. I hear that there is a direct correlation between a lack of vitamin D and the COVID, a lack of vitamin D and even cancer. Get out here daily. You must do your exercise. You must get your rest. You must do your best not to stress. Stress will make your body a walking playground for COVID. I've shared with you guys in the past, I believe I've had this twice already. I may have the antibodies. I don't know. I've not gotten an antibody test. I believe I had this in October of 2017 and then again, first quarter 2019. My physician called it walking pneumonia, but all other symptoms, lack of taste, lack of smell, incessant fever, incessant cough. And the first time, because I would not take the shot. Now, I don't know what she gave me. I don't think it was remdesivir, but I don't know. Okay. The first time I caught it in October 2017, I did not take the shot. I took 10 days of antibiotics. It took 5 months for this thing to leave my system completely. The second time I took the 10-day antibiotic trials, and I also went back 3 consecutive days to get a shot to the buttocks which was very painless. I'm afraid of needles. That's why I didn't do it the first time. But my doctor insisted when it came back Q1. Okay. So, family, take control of your own health. Do not sit around and have issues that even remotely seem like COVID. Okay. Colds that last too long, coughs that are really incessant, fevers. You must take a COVID test and treat early. That's the way to save your lives out here. But in the meantime, do preventative things. Wear your mask, carry your bacterial lotions, because it's going down. I've got people, extended friends of the family, that are dying from this. And friends of friends. And relatives of friends that are dying from this. Take control of your own health. Get your rest. All of the above. You hear me? Next up, let's dig into the Black descendants of Seminole and Cherokee enslavement. Now, this has been a heavy, heavy topic, and folks don't really want this to be our monkey or our circus, but I want to enlighten you. I learned about the Indians owning us through Dr. Claude Anderson. I want you guys to understand, and I don't have time to do a whole history lesson. You can look these things up. Look up Dr. Claude Anderson speaking on this issue. I don't want to use the whole entire show just playing videos. But you must look up Dr. Claude Anderson speaking on this. He talked about runaway slaves being captured by the Indians. Okay? And as a part of their bounty, many of them were able to keep us as slaves within their camps. That's how they were awarded. If they caught you, they could keep you enslaved. Okay? So you need to understand that there were Africans here before us, and then there were Africans that were brought over here on slave ships. Now, I'm with you when you tell me that Black immigrants that got here after the 65 Immigration Act are not entitled to reparations. But understand, family, that even some Caribbeans did slavery in America. They were brought here from the Caribbean to be enslaved. You have to understand that when you call yourself an American descendant of slavery, it doesn't just mean your people came over here on a boat. No. If you did slavery in America, you are owed a reparations check. That's the way I see it. The Treaty of 1866, thank you. Now, the Treaty of 1866 gave Indians repair. But let's find out what happened to that reparations and whether or not the Cherokee and Seminole Indians that descend, the Black ones that descend from slavery, did they get the reparations from this 1866 treaty? Let me share the screen. Family, we have got to be educated on these things before we speak outside of our necks and deny people that are due, that are owed. So let's talk a little bit about the Florida history of the Black Seminoles. Just a little bit, and I'm going to jump around some, so bear with me. The Underground Railroad was a pathway used by runaway slaves to escape the shackles of slavery and pursue a life of freedom. Traditionally, the railroad headed north toward freedom, but a small portion of runaways instead turned south toward Florida. In 1693, the Spanish had abolished slavery in Florida. You hear me? 1693, the Spanish had abolished slavery in Florida. So we were enslaved by Spaniards here before the transatlantic slave trade, establishing a safe haven for runaway slaves. But life for the runaway slave in Florida was not utopic either. The Seminoles were Native Americans, you hear me? That took their name from the Creek word meaning runaway or separatists. It would seem that the escaped slaves were not the only runaways in Florida. Prior to the Seminole Wars, the Seminoles were spread out across the entire state and even spoke different variations of Muskegon. It wasn't until the war started that the disparate groups began to align themselves. The runaway slaves formed their own tribes adjacent to and sometimes with the Seminoles. Though some tribes treated escaped slaves as slaves, they claim that they were not as brutal and merciless as the white slave owners. That can be believed. The Seminoles generally allowed the ex-slaves to live freely as long as they shared their crops at the end of the season. So they participated more so in what sharecropping was. Still slavery by another name. They were called Black Seminoles, Black Indians, and Seminole freedmen. The Black Seminoles adopted Seminole traditions and lifestyles. They eventually married into the tribes, and their children were accepted by the tribes. With the help of the Seminoles, the former slaves learned how to live as freemen and were quite prosperous. But this does not sit well with white slave owners. They conspired with the government and convinced them it was time to rid the state of the natives that lived there in hopes of getting their slaves back. This caused 3 separate wars waged between the two nations, referred to as the Seminole Indian Wars. They were exclusively fought in Florida. During these wars, the Black Seminoles were considered to be the fiercest and courageous fighters the U.S. government had ever fought. You see, the key word there, the U.S. government. Slavery, freedmen, fighting to stay free. All of that makes them American descendants of slavery, whether you like it or not. In the First Seminole War, whole divisions of Black Seminoles fought off the invading U.S. soldiers who were being led by General Andrew Jackson. We know him very well. Wasn't he the racist that took away our 40 acres and a mule once we were emancipated? Following the First Seminole War and the ceding of Florida to the United States by Spain, the Seminoles were banished from northern Florida according to the Treaty of Multier Creek. The U.S. began building forts and other settlements in the north of Florida. The Second Seminole War began in the 1830s as a response to President Jackson's Indian Removal Act. The United States government aimed to banish the Seminoles from Florida entirely. The Seminoles made use of guerrilla warfare tactics, but U.S. General Thompson Jessup changed the course of the war through the treacherous capture of the Seminole leaders while using signs of truce. By the end of the Second Seminole War, most of the Seminole population had died in battle or undergone relocation. What Seminoles were left were further brutalized in the Third Seminole War, which left merely 500 Seminoles in Florida. Most of the Seminoles had been relocated to where? Oklahoma. Following relocation to Oklahoma, Seminoles were forced to live under Creek law. While the Seminoles were treated somewhat respectfully, the Black Seminoles were treated with disdain. Black Seminoles were often excluded from representation and what family? Reparations. The Seminole Nation restricted membership to those with ancestors on the Dawes rolls, which I'll get into next, a restriction that excluded over 1,000 freedmen. Some Black Seminoles fled to Mexico where they formed a new tribe and were given the name Muskogos. In recent memory, the government finally acknowledged the claims of Black Seminoles and started awarding the much overdue benefits to those who descended from the tribes. Well, we have to dig into that further because I've seen video footage that they still haven't been awarded reparations that they were owed per that 1866 treaty. Even under Obama, they were still fighting for their share. While the Black Seminoles may not be as well known as their counterparts, their role in the history of Florida can still be felt to this day. Okay, so let me move on to, let me come back. I want to tell you what the Indians chose to do with the Black Seminole reparations, as opposed to paying the Black Seminoles that descend from their enslavement, okay? The freedmen. Let me share the screen. Let's read about the Dawes Rolls. Paying to play, Indian. The Dawes Rolls and the legacy of $5 Indians. Indian land for sale, get a home. Hold on. Child, the ghetto with these ads. Oh, they're killing me. Get a home of your own. Perfect title. Possession within 30 days. Easy payments. Fine lands in the West. Irrigated, irrigable, grazing, agricultural, dry farming. In 1910, the Department of Interior sold under sealed bids allotted Indian land as follows. Okay? Not for the Black, Seminole, and Cherokee Indians that descend from slavery. Not for the freedmen. So let's get into it. Dawes Rolls, rife with opportunistic white men and early appropriation. It may be fashionable to play Indian now, but it was also trendy 125 years ago when people paid $5 a piece for falsified documents declaring them native on the Dawes Rolls. These so-called $5 Indians paid government agents under the table in order to reap the benefits that came with having Indian blood. Mainly white men with an appetite for land, $5 Indians paid to register on the Dawes Rolls, earning fraudulent enrollment in tribes along with benefits inherited by generations to come. These were opportunistic white men who wanted access to land or food rations, said Gregory Smithers, associate professor of history at Virginia Commonwealth University. These were people who were more than happy to exploit the Dawes Commission, and government agents for $5 were willing to turn a blind eye to the grift and corruption. The Dawes Commission, established in 1893 to enforce the General Allotment Act of 1887, or the Dawes Act, was charged with convincing tribes to cede their land to the United States and divide remaining land into individual allotments. This feels like the Homestead Act all over again. The commission also required Indians to claim membership in only one tribe and register on the Dawes Rolls, what the government meant to be a definitive record of individuals with Indian blood. Look at the trickery, family. And I'm going through this exercise because we need to understand that Black descendants of Seminole and Cherokee Indian enslavement are not only American descendants of slavery, but we need to see the sleight of hand that happened to exclude them from the reparations that was already awarded them so that we can avoid these pitfalls. Don't you think that's a helpful exercise? I do. The Curtis Act passed in 1898 targeted the 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole, forcing them to accept allotments and register on the Dawes Rolls. The 2 acts, which came during a period of murky social context after the Civil War when white and Black men were intermarrying with Native American women, aimed to help the government keep track of, quote, real Indians while accelerating efforts to assimilate Indian people into white culture, Smithers said. By 1865, African Americans and white Americans were moving into the Midwest, into the Indian and Oklahoma territories, all vying for some patch of land they could call their own and live out their Jeffersonian view of independence, he said. The federal government poured a lot of effort and energy into the Dawes Commission, but at the same time, it was very hard for both Native and American governments to keep track of who was who, except when they were $5 white Indians. The Dawes Commission set up tents in Indian territory, said Bill Welch, Director Emeritus of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Office of American Indian Culture and Preservation. There, field clerks scoured written records, took oral testimony, and generated enrollment cards for individuals determined to have Indian blood. That included authentic Indians, Welch said, but it also included lots of people with questionable heritage, white folks. Commissioners took advantage of their positions and enrolled people who had very minimal or questionable connections to the tribes. He said, this is me speaking. This is why we must have control over who sits on the commission for American descendant of chattel slavery reparations. This is exactly why we need to control it. Commissioners took advantage of their positions and enrolled people who had very minimal or questionable connections to the tribes. They were not adverse to taking money under the table. The implications of such shady practices are enormous now, Smithers said. $5 Indians passed their unearned benefits to heirs who still lay claim to tribal citizenship and associated privileges. Now, we have people who are white, but who can trace their names back to the rolls used by tribal nations to ascertain who has rights as citizens, he said. That means we have white people who have the ability to vote at large. It means they've got political rights. It means the potential to influence tribal policy on a whole range of issues. It means people have access to healthcare, education, and employment. The implications are quite profound for people who got away with fraud. So if we are in support of the Black descendants of Seminole and Cherokee enslavement, how do we expect to be supported when it's our turn to receive our reparations? How do we prevent from this very scenario happening to us if we manage to exclude them that have already been excluded? Think about it. Things for you to think about. They're not as many in number as those of us who came over on slave ships. Are we really willing to exclude them from reparations and tell them that they aren't too American descendants of slavery? Just think about it, ponder it. On the flip side, while non-natives paid to play Indian, many authentic Indians who didn't trust the government chose not to register with the Dawes Rolls at all, said Gene Norris, a genealogist at the Cherokee National Historical Society. That means people with legitimate claims to tribal enrollment and the benefits are now excluded. Native Americans are the only racial group defined by blood, Norris said. Even that was arbitrary. In the 1890s, siblings who talked to different commissioners emerged with different blood quantum. Because they didn't apply together, some of them have different blood degrees. In short, the Dawes Rolls forever changed the way the federal government defined Indians, and in many cases, the way Indians still define themselves. But there's one thing they still all have in common: exclusion of the descendants of Black, Seminole, and Cherokee Indian enslavement. Are they not American descendants of slavery? The Dawes Rolls, even now, are a murky and very inaccurate gauge of Indian citizenship, he said. In the 2000 census, the number of people claiming Cherokee ancestry was 3 times that of official tribal enrollment. That's what happens when the federal government established the rules, not the natives. This is what's going to happen to ADOS if we allow the government to establish the rules and not the American descendant of chattel slavery. Smithers has no estimate of the number of people who fraudulently registered on the Dawes Rolls or who lay false claim to Indian citizenship now. But $5 Indians did not represent an isolated case of appropriation. What we had was simply white people claiming to be Indian, he said. What we will have, if we don't get ahead of this, based on the history, are $5 American descendant of chattel slavery whites taking advantage of the reparations. You already hear AOC and the Hispanics going for reparations, and they outnumber us with plans to bring in 22 million more immigrants. So do we want to fight and have pissing matches with people that lead other movements, or do we want to go to work? Hit me up, Friends of American Descendant Chattel Slavery Community, Friends of ADOS TV at Gmail. What we had was simply white people. Okay, we did that part. Okay, so let me come over and see what you guys are saying. I'm at 6:29. Okay, I didn't start to 5:30. Oh, I'm doing good. Okay. Let me come over and see what you guys have to say before I get into my read. Elizabeth Warren, you're right, Lafayette. I'm only going to read the pertinent comments before I get into the read for the evening. Let me stop sharing the screen. Albadi Winbush, America's with 3K's GDP is 20 trillion a day. They could just cut a check. Thank you, family, for that. Absolutely. Ain't no shame in demanding 104 trillion. Go big or go home. Justin Mathis, ADOS New Jersey in the house. What's up, Joseph Thompson? Thank you for joining the live. Lafayette says, great strategy, whether to have no pay and taxes for 400 years, plus free healthcare education based on unlearning to relearn what is needed to learn. Speak assist, cbacusa.org. Absolutely, Dawn Page has been a friend to the show. We've gotten much work together with the COVID relief, and I'm absolutely with CBAC in terms of making those additional demands. That would be more like Black agenda items. But I'm talking money. I'm talking money deposited in, you know how you just received your little $1,200 or whatever, $600 from the government for this pandemic? I'm talking about money funding directly into your accounts in the trillions over multi-generations. I'm starting at 104 trillion. I'm revisiting that number once I do some calculations on the interest that has accrued since SHAWN's book was published in 2017. That's when I'm on. If you want to join me, you know how to reach me. Denise Jarrett, expert stylist, but we should get all those things too. We need free medical, free education. You know, just look up what all the Indians are benefiting from, plus casinos. And they're still getting reparations. And you heard Joe Biden. When we fought for our repair, he talked about the Indians needing repair, when they've already gotten them a ton of reparations that they've also shared with white folks, as I just read to you. The Black Cherokee and Seminole Indians have gotten nothing. They may have now, but when I remember them fighting Congress when Obama was in office, and they wouldn't move on making them whole. And why is that? Because all the money is concentrated between the whites that are $5 Indians and the Indians that owned us, the pure blood or purebred or whatever they want to call themselves. But they lay with us and produce babies, and many of us have that in our bloodline. So it's really going to be hard to make that distinction who came over on a slave ship and who was here already. If you did slavery in this country, you're owed a check. That's the way Angela Nirvana sees it. Okay? Plus all these other goodies. Thank you, Rodney, for joining the live. Craig's page. Okay, ADOS are Indians now. I don't know what that means, really. Some of us are. Some of us descend from Indian enslavement. I don't know when you joined the show, but I talked about it at the top, where Claude Anderson is teaching about how African slaves who ran away from the plantation, if the Indians caught them, a part of their bounty was to be able to keep us as slaves for themselves. So yes, it's a mixed bag over here. We also have white in us. They raped us. They bred us. Okay? Most of the fathers of the breeding farms of ADOS women were our white masters and their sons. Those are the fathers. That's why we come out looking all different types of hues and all different type of features. I don't know if Indians raped us. I don't think it was a love affair if you were enslaved as a form of bounty. I don't know if they just caught up and got in love with their masters, their Indian masters. I don't know. You know, history's always lying to us about how fun it was. Let them talk about our slavery. It was a great time. We loved being taken care of. To hell that it was, you know, the most heinous chattel slavery known to the born world. Let the history books tell it. We enjoyed it. So, you know, go figure. They're owed a check if they were slaves. If you descend from a slave in this country, you are owed a check. I don't care if you're Caribbean and were brought here. If you did slavery over here and you could trace your lineage back to a descendant of slavery in this country, you're one of us. You're an American descendant of slavery. That's how I see it. DJ Segwan, thank you for joining the live. Yes, share, family. Oh, let me just play my little thing. If you guys, thank you to all my donors, large and small. Aggregated dollars help me to do what I do. I'm grateful. Let me just show you where you can. I'm going to put the banner on for a little bit while I go through the comments. I'll turn it off when it's time to read. Oh, if I remember to. Show. That's where you can hit me up if you'd like to donate to more. If you'd like to assist me in educating the masses and in my advocacy for the reparations and the Black agenda, all donations are welcome, large and small. No pressure. I understand a lot of our challenges during this pandemic and our challenges at large as a people. I'm grateful to you, family. Thank you. DJ Segwan, what's up, darling? ZZ Captron 1 says Trump didn't like Twitter putting a notice on his fake or misleading post. He's such a big crybaby. I still say this about Trump. He was a racist in office for 4 years versus racist plural in office for a combined 65 years. I'm not as offended by the things he says as I am the records of Biden and Kamala. That is what offends me. 1 million of our Black men imprisoned in the new slavery called the private prison industrial complex. How many of us have been gunned down by government sanction due to the author of the 94 crime bill, Jim Crow Sloppy Joe, and Cali's top cop, Kamala the Chameleon, who told the governor when she was AG, she's not letting the nonviolent offenders go because she needs them to put out white fires in the hills here in California for $1 a day. And she locked up mothers of truant children who had medical challenges and whose parents had to work themselves into the ground and couldn't guarantee their kids got to school on time. She put them in jail and laughed about it. So I don't really care about Trump and what he says and what he tweets. It matters to me what you've done to my people to put your boot on the neck of the American descendant of chattel slavery in this country. And that's why I am on weaponizing our vote and socializing our suffering. I've said it before. I'll repeat it for the newcomers. I believe in a red top and a blue Congress to protect the over 43% of American descendants of chattel slavery who rely on government assistance by design of institutional systemic racism. What I'm suggesting is nothing different than Dr. Charles Morris, pastor of Abyssinia Church, who said after we delivered Theodore Roosevelt, was it Teddy Roosevelt? I think so. Oh my God, I've said this so many times. I'm having a brain freeze. I do believe it was Teddy Roosevelt who dishonorably discharged 167 Buffalo soldiers who were wrongfully accused of murdering a second white man after being quarantined in their barracks after being wrongfully accused of murdering the first white man. Dr. Charles Morris told him that you shot us when our guns were empty. You know, akin to what Biden recently did to the civil rights leaders that were making demands of him to not execute us, as he has plans to give the race soldiers $30 million more to over-police our communities instead of education, instead of getting rid of gentrification and beautifying our communities and getting rid of the environmental waste in our communities, instead of giving us grants to open up our own businesses akin to the set-asides that the immigrants are given, instead of giving us money to buy our homes, he chooses to give $30 million more to the race soldiers. So what I'm saying by a red top in a blue Congress is nothing unakin to what he was offering to do after he told Roosevelt, you shot us when our guns were empty. And for that, we're going to repay you by delivering a Democratic top a ticket and a Republican Congress to protect the Black South. So that's my square. I don't give a damn about what Trump tweets, but I get you, fam. I'm sure he was upset, and that's probably why he vetoed it, because he likes to go off the rails. But who cares what you say? I care what you do. And nobody has yet to share with me, whenever I inquire, what has Donald Trump done more egregious to American descendants of chattel slavery than Kamala the Chameleon and Sloppy Joe Jim Crow? What has he done? Not what he said about other groups, because I'm not really, call African a shithole country. That wasn't nice. But it's not enslaving my brothers and sisters in the private prison industrial complex. Calling African names is not oppressing my people. That's what I'm on records. Oliver Tanja, distractions, erase it, and our history. Absolutely. That's what they want to do with the symbolism, tearing down these statues, so we can forget altogether. They don't want those reminders all over the place, because we're here like a steady drumbeat family on this reparations. We will haunt them in their sleep. And please don't say, well, how do you expect to get that done from these race soldiers in the office? Our ancestors had no time to think about that when they stormed the Union camps after escaping slavery to put pressure on Lincoln to give us our emancipation. Dr. Martin Luther King could not concern himself with his life. He put it all on the line for our civil rights. So this is my square. I can't tell you when it's going to happen. I just know I work every day at this, as all of us should. We're at George Floyd 846. The neck is on our neck, even if you don't see it, even if you can still breathe. We are a wealthless group. We ain't got to wait till 2053. We're already there. And we built all the wealth that all these other groups eat from that table. We are the legs. And capitalism requires a bottom. I'm telling you, ADOS is done being the bottom. Patrice Lang Jordan, thank you for joining the live, my love. ADOS are still lab rats. You overstand. You saw how they killed Dr. Susan Moore. That's how they're killing the lot of us throughout the country. Tuskegee, you're right, Patrice, downright shameful. Terry says, I feel so sad for her. Where was the help? She was a doctor, a physician, a medical doctor. This is what they did to an ADOS doctor. It's unconscionable. Imagine what's happening to our people throughout this country that don't have her stature. Lafayette Ward, medical doctor, no respect, even with credentials. You understand that ADOS life. Now her 19-year-old son has to give care to her parents who have dementia, early signs of Alzheimer's. 19 years old, his life is over. He's got to take care of those parents. Oliver Tanja says, my mom went to the hospital 3 times. They sent her home with constipation. She went to the white side of town and beat cancer. Praise God. Praise God. You're right. Thank you for sharing, Oliver. Okay. Oh, Lord, let me go back up. The Treaty of 1866. That's where I was. It jumps sometimes, family. Okay, Sincere. Since I'm here, one, thank you for joining the live. Oh, Andrew Johnson took our 40 acres. And not Andrew Jackson. Thank you for the correction, my love. Lord Jackson Johnson. It's all puckery. You're absolutely right. In my mind, I kind of knew that, but I couldn't come up with which Andrew did it. Which Andrew J. I always confuse those two. But in my mind, I can promise you, fam, it dawned on me that something wasn't right with the timeline. So thank you for that correction. Lafayette Ward, Elizabeth Warren is a $5 Indian. DJ Segwan said, our body here. Segwan on the tube. That's why the stimulus check ain't ish. Ask for 500 trillion, LOL. Darling, go big or go home. Now, if we want 104 trillion, we really do need to double that and meet somewhere in the middle. But I know 17 trillion is not enough. It's not well with my soul to go 17 trillion. Love Darity, love his work. But I prefer to use the numbers here. They feel more sound. If you've been following along, you've heard the read, and you can see how that can add up quickly. It's not our fault, family, that the number's so high. Okay. Valerie Kelly Bonner, ADOS Detroit here, invited by Shannon McFall. Oh, Shannon, you guys check out Shannon's show. Shannon, type your show in the link. Thank you, Valerie, for joining the live ADOS Detroit. Lafayette Ward, crazy AF. Need to get to him before he gets any more dementia. The march is still on January 20th. Yes, there's a reparations march on January 20th, family, and the 21st. It's 2 days in the nation capital on Inauguration Day. Now, the millennials demand to be there. They don't care about COVID when they understand they're a wealthless group and can't find jobs and have a whole bunch of student loan debt. They're not listening to the Gen Xers like myself, who has said, let's just wait till spring. They are capitalizing on the moment. Marchforreparations.com. Please visit it. If you don't plan to attend, at least donate so that they can have a successful march. Check for both sides of the bloodline. Baby Kid 1, check for both sides of the bloodlines. The bottom line is, if any side descends from slavery in America, you are ADOS and you get a check. I don't know why y'all want to nickel and dime this thing to death. Now, y'all had me with the immigrants, not being entitled because they didn't do slavery here. They don't descend from that. I'm with you. I can ride with you on that. But I cannot get caught up in the crosshairs of, as long as you can prove it, you should be entitled to a check. You are ADOS. Poker Nut 518, why are you yelling, man? We can hear you just fine, no offense. Oh, Poker Nuts, I'm just impassioned. You might want to turn down your volume. That's how I speak. I have a loud voice. I grew up in a family of 4, and we yelled everything. So I'm sorry if it hurt your ears. Turn down your volume, and it can be a little imbalanced because for some reason my YouTube videos don't come in loud enough. But when I get passionate, I tend to get a big voice. Plus, I come from the theater industry, the television, theater, and film. That was my passion before I became a mom and an advocate for reparations. Like I said prior, I'm willing to work with all grassroots and allies. I would love to see more of you in this fight because, as I told a person who wants me to concern myself with other groups, that's the problem with ADOS at large. We're such a forgiving, nurturing people that we have literally helped to tether ourselves to the bottom while not screaming long before now for the reparations. Now, it doesn't mean the fight wasn't happening before the ADOS movement, okay? The fight was happening. But the revolution is being social mediaized. And we've got these tools to really make this message spread like wildfire. And that's why I use my voice. So forgive me, but if I'm too loud, adjust your volume. Because adjusting me when I'm on a roll is virtually impossible. I'll do my best to remember, but I'm very impassioned. I don't mean to yell. I'm just a drama queen. Alexis Cummings, thank you for joining the live, my love. And thank you to, who is this? Poker Nuts 518. Okay, thank you for joining the live. Alexis Cummings, thank you, my love. Welcome joining. Thank you for joining the live. She's one of my staunchest comrades. That was Biden's dementia that caused him to pivot to the Native American. Oh my God. That was Biden's benign neglect that had him pivot to the Native Americans. That's what I believe happened. His benign neglect. Okay. Baby Kid 1, check for that too. LaFair Ward, that is crazy. Of the bounty. Yeah, that actually happened. Look up Claude Anderson. He does a great presentation on what happened. It's just rich. I was blown away. Oh, Gibson Eugene, teach his smart ass. Oh, I didn't mean to curse. I'm trying. Well, I'm a work in progress. What can I say? I curse too. Lord knows. I'm trying to clean that up. DJ Segwan, This is Turtle Island, of course. Some of us are Native Americans. Go to Dane Calloway page. Yes, Dane Calloway speaks on this, although people are fighting Dane on these issues. I agree with him in part, maybe not in whole. But hey, like I said, if you descend from slavery in this country, you're owed a check, period. That's my 2 cents, the way I see it. Some of you may choose to say that's not my monkey, not my circus. Woe be unto us as this country continues to say the same about our repair. I would say they're too small in number to really fight over that, and that we should include them if they want to be included in the fight. But maybe that's my work at Friends of ADOS, Friends of ADOS. I have to put the C in there. Like I mentioned earlier, no offense to ADOS, but Yvette wants to exclusively own her hashtag. Let me not live there. She wants to own the hashtag and move it to a 501c4. And ADOS, now that I have that in my name and there's so much heat around the ADOS movement, I'm now being shadow banned. So I put the C in there for chattel to make the distinction, and I moved away from acronyms altogether pretty much. I mean, I'll throw ADOS up there, but I want, out of respect for Yvette now getting involved in taking over the movement, I don't want any confusion over the way I choose to ebb and flow. So I spell it out: American descendants of chattel slavery. I think Solidarity Reparations uses ADOS too. So, that was her hashtag, although I know the history of how this movement started because I was a part of it. And I will never, ever deny us the work and the sweat equity we put into a lot of things, a lot of measures and bills locally, on the state level, and on the national level. We are the movement, and we've never needed permission to move. Okay. So lots of things I'll be doing differently in terms of how I choose to move with the people I am aligning myself with, grassroots and allies alike throughout the country and the globe, actually, to get this done. Terry Lewis, welcome to the live. It was the same thing when he refused to sign that stimulus. Look what occurred. I don't really know. Trump is going to do Trump message. I don't really know what that. Oh, you mean in terms of the way they come for him? Well, the 2000 didn't get passed, I don't think. I think that's Mitch McConnell's monkey. They may have just given the Congress to the Democrats. I don't believe a trifecta is good for the ADOS. I believe nothing will get done with the trifecta of the Democrats. I really prefer a Trump top and a blue Congress. I think that's the best way to slow things down, slow the momentum of government while we get into position for the repair. And furthermore, speaking on that, the CBC doesn't need to study what we're owed. They can just defer to this book. As a matter of fact, I think I'll send this copy to Sheila Jackson Lee, buy up some copies of Shawn's book and send it to all of Black CBC to let them know that we don't need to pay them $12 million to study the reparations we are owed. The number is 104 trillion on the conservative side and 735 billion, I think I said when I did the math on the ongoing recurring annual cost. Okay. So they don't really need that. We don't need to pay 12 million for people we've already hired to do the work in Congress, who have also gotten a $25 million pay increase given the last stimulus that folks were mad Trump would not sign because the money was too low for us. They've gotten enriched with $25 million more dollars in the House of Representatives on their already bloated salaries, plus double health care, while doctors like Dr. Susan Moore, ADOS, die from COVID. Let that sink in. Corey, the ADOS vegan, facts over feelings. There it is, boo. Boom. Alexa says there will have to be a mediation procedure defined under the eligibility criteria of a procedure established by way of any legislation passed to enact reparations. To my thinking, there would need to be a provision for the descendants of the African and indigenous people. Many were fleeing the institution of slavery when they sought respite and alliance with indigenous peoples. Absolutely, Alexis. I love that. You're very right. So to Dr. Darity. Oh no, I love Dr. Darity. Don't go run making rumors now. I'm a no to 17 trillion. Absolutely. I told you what the number I'm working with. Okay. Not really sharing who I'm working with. Some things you have to do in silence, but if you're interested in getting in the fight and want to understand how I'm approaching things, feel free to email me at, oh Lord, just a second, I got to plug in the computer. $17 trillion is the number that Yvette is working with the ADOS movement. That's Darity's number. I believe it's too low. I'm going for more like 104 trillion, hopeful to meet in the middle at 50. But there's other things, and there's more interest that has accrued since the book was published in 2017. I'm using his book. Yvette is probably using Darity's book and his work, and that's fine. They're free to do that. It can help for all of us to get involved for whatever we think it should be. If you are interested in that advocacy and you want to accompany me and assist me akin to some of the other people throughout the country and Africa, email me at friendsofadostv@gmail. And then you can also reach me at Friends of American Descendants of Chattel Slavery community in Facebook. I just established a page, but I'll get to you, I'm going to finish fleshing that out and we can do the work together. Like I said earlier at the top of the show, I'm not into the egos of the leaders of any of this. They were great at creating foundational Black Americans, Black family first, Black first, ADOS, great hashtags. I'm here for the work. I'm not here for the egos and the wars. That's not how I do. I'm constantly working and trying to find ways and people to work with to get this done in my lifetime. That's my square, okay? Ali, Kiki, and Bari, his lift every voice is immigrant supported too. A bunch of BS. Absolutely. Everything is immigrant oriented. So I don't need to fight for immigrants. I need to fight for American descendants of chattel slavery. That's my fight. Both of their plans sucked. Biden's and Trump's. There was nothing in it for us. No teeth in it. Lafayette, this is crazy. He shared something here. What is but we are given much from U.S. welfare systems. What is but we're given much from U.S. welfare systems? Well, that doesn't count because not all of us were on welfare. Just like prison reform, yes, we absolutely need it. But what about 34 million ADOS who aren't in prison or never been to prison? Welfare mostly benefits white folks. They're the majority of people in the country. We're not the majority of the welfare kings and queens. As a matter of fact, the government and corporate are the biggest welfare queens and kings. They like to capitalize their profits and socialize their losses. So they are the biggest welfare queens and kings, while they try to make it out that Black folks are the biggest welfare kings and queens. Not true. Whites, immigrants, and corporatists are the biggest welfare kings and queens in this country, not the ADOS. YVOP info. Hi, Angela. I learned the other day that Dr. Susan Moore was Jamaican. Sorry for how she was treated due to white racism. Is she Jamaican? I don't know. Now, this is where I'm not going to split hairs. She was mistreated as a Black doctor, physician. My fight and argument stands the same. We don't have the complexion for the protection. So there are some things that the immigrants are entitled to, like a Black agenda should benefit them too. But when it comes to reparations, that's my square. That's for American descendant of chattel slavery. I won't depart from that. So if she was Jamaican, God bless her, it's still wrong. I didn't hear an accent. For a Jamaican doctor, she had impeccable ADOS English. So I don't know. Unless I can see the receipts. It doesn't matter. I don't need to see the receipts. Okay. She didn't deserve to die in the way that she did. And I know that as a Black physician, that's why she died. They're not mistreating white physicians this way. Let's just put it that way. And immigrants that identify as white don't get treated this way. Lafayette, Obama gave $25 to $30 trillion from white privileged financial institutions before he left. Very good square, sis. Look at that information. 25 to 30 trillion from white privileged financial institutions before he left. Well, I know he created 1 million white millionaires on his watch, while 43% of American descendants of chattel slavery lost their wealth. Black immigrants are faring far better financially than us. They take advantage of the affirmative action, and they've got the set-asides, and they come from money, many of them. So, yeah, that's why I'm fighting for ADOS exclusively. Lafayette, nah, that was the link of the white folks' hand given of their middle class. I really don't know what that means. Yes, absolutely. You are right. Thanks, Angela. YVOC info. Oh, you're welcome, my love. Thank you. Hey, we are learning from each other. Facts rest in power to the doctor, says DJ Segwan. Absolutely. With that said, family, it's story time. I hope you got your libations nearby, your cozy comforters, and your fireplaces lit. Like I said, I love to read, but even greater, it is my role to educate the masses and to continue and further my advocacy. It is my role to help American descendants of chattel slavery overstand the debt that is owed in the trillions over multi-generations, because I'm fighting for my daughter. I'm fighting for my grandbabies that have yet to be born, my great-grands, and my entire family line. I'm fighting for the lineage at large, as are you. Many of you, I thank you so much. You're the wind beneath my wing, my co-host whom I read from. You guys are the wind beneath my wings. You support the show in all ways, and I'm forever grateful. Okay. And so my fight is for all of the lineage, and specifically my daughter. I shouldn't have to die for her to be a millionaire. None of us should have to have that kind of insurance in order to make our children better off in our death than they are while we're amongst the living. That's not how any of this works on my watch. Yeah. And so when I read to you, I both enjoy it, but many of us are auditory, visual learners. That's why I put my little jewels on and I try to give you something nice to rest your eyes on. Like, it's all a part of pulling you in. Yes, it is. It's all from God. And I'm using it to advance ADOS, to advance us. And I need for you guys to learn so you can advocate alongside with us. That's why I do this. I both love it, and I like to reach those who are auditory or who don't have time to pick up a book to read. My reads are very, very short. I'll only be reading a portion of this chapter and close you guys out. We're at 1 hour and 32. So when it hits the bewitching 2-hour mark, I'm going to be done, and we'll pick up next Friday where we leave off today. Okay. Alexa says ADOS needs to be recognized as its own unique ethnicity so that as reparations programming is developed, it's clear who the targeted beneficiaries are. We're working on that, Alexis. We absolutely are working on our own ethnicity in the census and at large. Folks like to try to charge us with being xenophobic. No, it's imperative that we unflatten Blackness so that you can see the 90% of Blacks are American descendants of chattel slavery who are oppressed as the anchor for this country. And that has to be done. So we do have to untether who we are so people can see us. We're done with the tricks of the government to allow flattening of Blackness under people of color, minority, African American, and Black. That's not enough distinction for that reparations. So you're absolutely right, Alexis. We are working for that distinction. Lafayette, that was that link. A goddess you are, Angela Nirvana. Oh, thank you, Lafayette. Thank you for the love and for always sharing. Terry Lewis, keep doing you, love. Thank you. Use what you have. That's right, Sean DeVette. All of us should use what we have, whatever God gives us. And whatever God tells you is your square, get on it. It is 2021, family. Happy New Year. And with that said, family, it's time to strengthen your resolve. Relax. So I already read to you the black tax from 1619 to the present, a short summary. I did those numbers for you. And now we're jumping into part 3 of the black tax, the cost of being black in America. Now, part 3, what can we do about the black tax? Well, in addition to advocating for reparations and a black agenda, let's see what Sean has to say about it. For any people to thrive, their society must be built on a foundation of 7 pillars. Those pillars are opportunity, trade, industry, and innovation, capital, skill, and security, which form the acronym OPTICS. Trade is the ability to exchange goods and services for economic benefit, and industry is the process of producing goods and services for trade. Innovation is the utilization of technology to improve things of value. Capital is the financial means to develop the infrastructure to make goods and trade them. Skill is the ability to do something that others cannot, or to do it substantially better than others can. Security is the state of being able to retain and maintain your life, liberty, and property. Opportunity is the ability to participate in a valuable endeavor. Trade, industry, and innovation, capital, skill, and security all require opportunity. Every great nation, past and present, has been built on the 7 pillars of optics. The black tax has devastated the optics for Black Americans, leaving us with just 2% of American wealth. While we struggle within a 2% paradigm or rule that seems to emerge again and again in areas of vital importance to American descendants of chattel slavery, economic development. Like I said, my number is working with not just slavery, but it includes Jim Crow and what altogether, family, accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. The 2% rule is driven by the massive and continuous levels of anti-Black discrimination and disenfranchisement that served as a confiscatory tax on Black people's ability to accumulate wealth. Chattel slavery in America was a 250-year period of a 100% tax on enslaved people, which stripped, my apologies, I looked down and lost my place. My daughter's texting me, which stripped the ancestors of Black Americans of $50 trillion. That's the median, right? The number is as high as 93 trillion, as he mentioned at the top of his book. He took a median between 24 trillion and 93 to land at 50, which stripped the ancestors of Black Americans of $50 trillion and left newly emancipated people owning approximately 0.17% of American wealth after emancipation. This was followed by a 100-year nightmare from emancipation through Jim Crow to the end of the Civil Rights Movement, where Black Americans faced another massive confiscatory tax on opportunity, trade, industry, and innovation, capital, skill, and security. Within each of these pillars, Black Americans received the lowest level of investment and the highest level of restrictions. This created a great appreciation among African Americans for any form of advancement, accomplishment, or attainment above the absolute minimum allowed by white Americans, and made the 2% phenomenon one outlined below tolerable for an entire people. The combined 350-year period of slavery and Jim Crow apartheid was then followed by 50 years of an extraordinary progress for the top 2% of African American families and a massive amount of economic deprivation, mass incarceration, and intergenerational poverty for millions of others. Like I said prior, that 10% mostly includes Black immigrants, with some exceptions, like the Oprahs, the LeBrons, so on and so forth. The 2% rule. Research shows that Black Americans were often restricted to 2% levels or less in many vitally important aspects of the economy, politics, and society at large that facilitated wealth accumulation. Black Americans were emancipated but denied land, capital, credit, fair wages, means of production, skills development, and free trade, all of which were far below the 2% level. Held less than 2% of U.S. wealth for 350 years, owned less than 2% of all U.S. land for 400 years, currently 1%, held less than 2% of almost all high-skilled, high-paying jobs in all industries for 150 years after emancipation, received less than 2% of 246 million acres distributed to 1.5 million American families, actually less than 0.27%, received less than 2% of the $120 billion distributed to Americans via federal housing subsidies, received less than 2% of the $95 billion distributed to Americans via the GI Bill, received less than 2% of the $50 billion distributed to Americans via the New Deal, received less than 2% of agricultural subsidy payments distributed to American farmers. Less than 2% of the adult Black population was allowed to attain college degrees as of 1950, me speaking. Hence why class-based policies don't fix race. You don't get to do another white wealth transfer through a erasure of student loan debt when only about 18% of ADOS is college degreed. Today, Black Americans have unknowingly settled into a 2% equilibrium with their most vital financial enterprises. Black Americans spend less than 2% of their combined $1 trillion income on Black enterprises, deposit less than 2% of their combined $130 billion of deposits in Black banks, spend less than 2% of their combined $1.2 trillion income on education. Let me help you with something. We aren't worth 1.2 trillion. We are less than 700 billion since COVID. Less than 700 billion. We spend less on these things because we've got to use the money we obtain to live. I told you the 10% is mostly Black immigrants. They share maybe a couple of trillion, not ADOS. This has a massive depressive impact on job creation, business development, and business formation. It seems that what was done to Black Americans by their fellow citizens, Black Americans now do within their own communities and to Black enterprises and businesses. This minuscule level of commercial activity with Black enterprises starves Black businesses of capital, dramatically reduces demand for their goods and services, limits the development of an industrial base with economies of scale, and further depresses the demand for additional employment and skill development at all levels within the Black community. All of which helps to, one, prevent the community from being comprised of a healthier mix of producers and consumers, and two, keeps it comprised almost exclusively of low-income consumers. Well, once again, welcome, JoJo, to the live. Once again, I just kind of, disagree with Sean here. We don't spend because we don't have. Furthermore, we don't have Black businesses in our communities to recycle our dollars through. Furthermore, when you got immigrants who are able to do economies of scale on the goods and services they sell, that usually means poor ADOS have to hike up the prices in order to get business done amongst their own people. So, some things I agree with Sean. Here, not so much. This low level of investment and economic engagement in Black enterprises by African Americans serves as an additional tax, which further stifles job creation and wealth accumulation in our communities. Because of this, Black Americans are faced with two Black taxes. Here I agree. One imposed by their fellow citizens and one imposed by themselves. Once again, I disagree that we're imposing it on ourselves. Barack Obama lent less than 1% of SBA loans. He gave less than 1% to American descendants of chattel slavery. So maybe this was the data up through 2017. I don't know how, when that's what Obama did. It takes capital to own business in your own communities when this government is setting aside the monies to give to immigrants, blacks alike too, which Sean is one. Okay. But in this, I disagree. We don't have the capital. They don't lend us the money. They shouldn't even be lending us money. It should be a gift. They should be granting us money to run our businesses in our communities. But they bring in immigrants to oppress us. That's how it's being weaponized against us in our own communities. We can't own our communities, home ownership nor businesses. So this is where I disagree. Yeah, I don't believe that we impose a black tax on ourselves by not spending money with each other. Black folks are going to go where they can get a savings so they can keep the money for their children's education or whatever else they need to do for the family. They're not going to pay that additional black tax on black goods and services because we can't afford to buy in enough bulk to compete with white capital that was stolen from us. Whether driven by conscious or unconscious bias, Black Americans spend an extraordinarily small amount of their income and deposit a similarly small amount of capital in their own banks. Well, this is another thing. How much of the money in those banks are black money? Or is that white money in the black banks? Something to explore. The net effect of these actions is highly discriminatory in nature and impact. Gary Becker, in his book, The Economics of Discrimination, 1957, wrote that discrimination lowers the incomes of both the party that discriminates and the party that is discriminated against. This second form of black tax, driven by Black Americans discriminating against themselves, has the doubly negative effect of lowering the incomes for both black enterprises and the black consumers. It is also important to note that the less capital each party has, the larger the effect discrimination has on lowering each party's income. Since black enterprise and black consumers have very little capital, the discriminatory effect has an even greater impact on reducing income within the community. Unfortunately, many companies and institutions have also settled into a mode of investing 2% or less in black people and black enterprises. Their actions seem to convey an unwillingness or disinterest in investing more in black employment and black enterprises than black Americans are willing to invest in and demand for themselves. Consider the following list of instances where the 2% rule is still in effect today. Okay, let me go back. So what he's alluding to is that, a black cryptocurrency. I see you, Gibson Eugene. Yeah, we're going to need a lot of things, but financial education is one of them. I will be hosting a new show called Becoming Your Own Economy. More about that later, but it's going to teach us about how to do just that, because we have to, by way of the discrimination that's happening in the workforce. We have to learn to become our own economy until they cut the checks. Like, none of us has ever sat by idly. Peace, Trex. None of us has ever sat by idly doing nothing. We've always been a people to pull ourselves up by our bootless straps. But what Sean is saying is because we don't invest in ourselves, nobody else does either. Well, it takes our reparations. This is the piece he's missing in his book, that it takes the reparations and the trillions over multi-generations for us to own our own businesses, to do business with each other. Because guess what? He also left out the burning down of our Black Wall Streets, about 60 of them. So there was a time when we were doing for ourselves and white folks hated it, akin to what happened to the Seminole Indians, like I just discussed earlier. When they don't like a thing, they just destroy it or come and co-opt it. So the things that we did to be self-sufficient, that's the piece that's missing in this exchange. Joel says, but the market would devalue it. We need some brave, courageous soldiers. We have to use our own currency and exchange it almost like a barter system. That's great, Joel. Me, you, and Gibson Eugene need to talk about that. Well, you know, whenever we try to do anything, it doesn't mean we don't continue to try, but please do know that our Black Wall Streets, about 60 in total, were burned down every time we assert our independence and we're coming up. White folks just came through and destroyed it. So that's another part of the Black tax that has to be factored in, the cost of burning down our Black Wall Streets throughout the country. Investment in business financing. Black-owned small businesses receive less than 2%, 1.7% of all loan money distributed through the SBA, according to an analysis by the Wall Street Journal. To my point, less than 2%, 1.5% of total corporate procurement dollars are spent with Black-owned businesses. 2014 Corporate Diversity Survey says less than 2%, 1% of tech companies with Black founders receive venture capital funding. FastCoexist.com. Research conducted by Venrock Vice President Richard Kirby in 2015 found that Black investors comprise less than 2% at 1.7% of the venture capital industry. Corporate leadership, less than 2%. 1% of Fortune 500 CEOs are Black. Less than 2%, 1.9% to be exact, of partners at law firms are African American. Source, the American Lawyers Diversity Scorecard. African Americans only account for 2.7% of senior level staff in the financial industry. The source is motherjones.com. Black employees comprise 2% of investment professionals. Source, venture capital firms. Blacks only make up about 2% of recent hires at tech firms. Source, The Atlantic magazine. Education. Less than 2% of school teachers and administration nationwide are Black men. Less than 2% of the nation's 3,000 colleges and universities tenured faculty are Black. In 2004, Blacks earned less than 2% of doctorates in math, physics, and computer science and all engineering disciplines. This is the cost of being Black in this country. This is the Black tax. This is institutional systemic racism. Just multiply these 1s and 2% by 35 million American descendants of chattel slavery. And tell me we don't need reparations like yesterday. HBCUs receive less than 2% of the more than $140 billion in federal grants for science and engineering awarded in the 1990s. Let's look at the media. Blacks consume more media per person than any other group, yet less than 2%, 1% to be exact, of film executives and directors who are members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences are Black. Less than 2% of advertising expenditures, $70 billion. Cable TV, national magazines, network TV, spot radio, syndicated TV goes to Black media outlets. Medicine and law. Gibson Eugene says, Joel says, damn, even in tech, they cheat us. Absolutely in tech, they cheat us. As a matter of fact, Kamala is planning with Joe Biden to bring in more East Brahmin Indian caste, which are white in India, to come here for H-1B visas for these tech jobs. Down here, the Asian Indians are $425,000 liquid to American descendant of chattel slavery, $200 liquid. Immigration is being weaponized to keep us against ADOS, to keep us tethered to the bottom as the anchor of this country. So why not, Gibson says, so why not trace our money through crypto and use it for political gain? I'm open to those discussions. Alexis, and again, these figures for Blacks being cited include non-ADOS Blacks. Yes. Yes. If we got all the way, well, the reading up until this point was speaking of the American descendant of chattel slavery. But definitely in these numbers I'm citing right now, this includes immigrant Black. I would venture to say that 90% of the 1% is Black immigrant. But I don't have that data to really cite that. And we are a data-driven group, as we've been taught to be. So when I read you these numbers, this is not the majority of the Blacks in this country, which are American descendant of chattel slavery. To Alexis's point, this is mostly Black immigrants in the 1 to 2% I'm citing you. That's even more harrowing. Medicine and law. Black women make up 2% of all doctors in the U.S., yet Black women make up less than 2% of all lawyers in the U.S. Black men make up 2% of all doctors in the U.S. Black men make up less than 2% of all lawyers in the U.S. Financial services. Blacks spend $150 billion per year financing cars and homes. Blacks make up 1 to 2% of all financial advisors, according to industry executives interviewed by financialplanning.com. Finance and insurance businesses account for just 2.2% of all African American businesses, according to the most recent statistics from the U.S. Department of Commerce. Agriculture. Black Americans currently own less than 2%, 0.9% to be exact. He should have said less than 1% of U.S. land, which is the same ownership level as in 1874. Now, let me take a breath. That's the same ownership level as in 1874. This was before the Immigration Act. And yet, this 0.9% is not American descendant of chattel slavery. These homes are now in the possession of Black immigrants. I've shared with you down here that the likelihood of Black immigrants being murdered by the race soldiers is slim to none. Very few exceptions, because the American descendant of chattel slavery here in Los Angeles is worth 200 liquid to African immigrants 60,000 liquid. Now, if you're 60,000 liquid, would you live amongst the people who are $200 liquid? Would the race soldiers be policing in the neighborhoods where you're 60,000 liquid, or are they policing in the neighborhoods where you're 200 liquid and living on Skid Row? 90% of ADOS is on Skid Row here in LA. Where do you think the millions of dollars are being funded for the race soldiers to be in our communities? The Black immigrants community or the ADOS communities? Moving on. This is why we have to unflatten Blackness, so we can really see the failure of American descendant of chattel slavery due to institutional systemic racism, because the Black immigrants are masking our failure in this country. Less than 2% of all U.S. farms are Black owned, but we still got sharecropping. Residential real estate. Since 1970, less than 2% of white homeowners has moved from predominantly white neighborhoods to predominantly Black neighborhoods. Business. Less than 2% of Black businesses have a presence in the following industries: information technology, finance and insurance, manufacturing, agriculture, oil, gas, and mining, utilities, wholesale trade. What American descendant of chattel slavery can afford to have any businesses in those industries? I'll wait. We're at an hour 58. So join me next Friday, where we will read the cumulative effect of the Black tax on African American wealth, and diversity/minority does not mean Black. Okay. Yeah, that's all we'll have time to read, are those two, because I may have to split up diversity, minority does not mean Black. It depends on the ADOS hot topic I get into and how time consuming that is. That's next Friday at 5 o'clock, family. I do hope to see you there. Please don't forget to join me on YouTube. Facebook, like I said, has a shadow ban on me. And you may not be receiving the notifications. So please go over to YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. As you share, the algorithms go up and it gives people an opportunity to learn this rich information, to strengthen their resolve to get in this fight for reparations in the trillions over multi-generations. And with that said, family, thank you so much for being the wind beneath my wings. Thank you for encouraging me and loving the way I contribute to the discussion and the fight for American descendants of chattel slavery. I appreciate you appreciating my voice in this fight and supporting me in that way that you do. Thank you. With that said, let me pray a prayer of protection over you for my peace of mind, that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever AEOS and its allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God. You are the voice of God. You are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. And with that said, family, you go out here and you make it a beautiful, God-inspired work week until we meet again Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 Central, 8 Eastern. And you go out in this world and show them who you truly are. Okay, family? Always know, if you haven't been told today, that I love you black and I love you strong. Peace, family.